3 days of Bills training camp now in the books. Position battles are out there and will start heating up. I'm Kevin Carroll. Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone podcast, along with Andy Young, as usual.
Yeah, Kevin, you must be like a time traveler because it feels like about 5 minutes ago I was standing next to you on the field at St. John Fisher University. Now you're back in studio in Buffalo. I don't know how you do it, buddy.
Don't tell the police, Andy, but might have a heavy foot on the gas to get back here.
That's not the only thing wrong with your driving.
Oh, yeah, just ask my parents. But that's a topic for another day, Andy. We do have 3 days of practice in the books. The way I look at it, the offense kind of started off slow, but is getting its feel. The defense looks good, but that's where the position battles really are, Andy. A lot of questions surrounding certain positions on the defense, but we've seen them able to, take on this Bills offense. I mean, heck, to wrap things up, with 3 interceptions on this third day of training camp.
Yeah, the first day, the defense was absolutely at an advantage when they practiced red zone work, mostly 10-yard line and in 11 on 11, and the defense really had its ways. Josh Allen said, look, I was throwing the ball away. That's a good thing in that spot because we're not committing turnovers in the red zone, but, you'd like to see them put a couple of more touchdowns on the board. Day 2, that seemed like it went more towards the offense. The pendulum swung the other way. Allen started to get in a rhythm. He was hitting guys like Elijah Moore, Joshua Palmer. Keon Coleman had a nice second day. And then day 3 was a little bit of a mixed bag for both sides. Some success for Taylor Rapp, the veteran safety, 3 interceptions, like you mentioned, on the day, but Allen also able to make some plays as well in the passing game and the running game too. So, you expect that this time of year. No pads are on yet, and you don't want to jump to a ton of conclusions. I had somebody on social media say, like, hey, wait till the pads are on. Football is played in a physical way before you make an opinion on somebody. Well, I'm here to watch camp and make some observations, make some opinions. What happens one day doesn't necessarily carry over to the next day.
Andy, I like to think this back and forth between the offense and the defense is actually a good thing. Iron sharpens iron. Isn't that what Sean McDermott says? So to have the offense have a day, the defense have a day, to have a mixed day just 3 days into it can be a good thing as far as this team coming together on where they want to be when the season starts off against the Baltimore Ravens.
And when you look at the way practices are structured, so when you're making observations, you don't know what the plan is. Is this a blitz heavy day? Is this something where the offense wants to work on a specific route, and so they're going to force it into that play? Is this a play where the defense isn't necessarily trying to push in a certain direction on a play because the offense needs to get some work on this? So it's hard to draw a ton of conclusions, but you can see who wins one-on-one battles. You can see footwork from wide receivers and who's getting open and who isn't, that sort of thing. You can see miscommunication or great communication on the defense. Line work is tough to judge, but we still try to do that too.
Yeah, of course. And, there's a lot to look at with the linemen because you have an offensive line coming back with everybody in place. You have a defensive line coming to training camp this year with a lot of new faces, a lot of young faces, Andy. And when you look at the defensive line, you're also dealing with 2 players that are going to miss the first part of the season and a bunch of rookies who need to get ramped up to come in and fill that role. So it's really a balancing act. I know we heard from Bobby Babich, the defensive coordinator, to wrap things up on the week, and he's in a position right now where he has to keep an eye on how much work he's giving to all these guys as they get closer to the regular season.
Yeah, I actually sat down for a one-on-one interview with one of those guys who's going to be suspended for the first 6 games, Michael Hoyt, the other being Larry Ogunjobi, and Hoyt told me right now he's treating this like it's his first 6 games. He's got to get all this work in now in the preseason, in training camp, before he has to leave the team facilities for basically 6 weeks and get all this work and time in now so that when he comes back on the field, and Ogunjobi as well, when they come back in week 7, that they're ready to roll and can be impactful players. Now, I will say I have been really impressed with Michael Hoyt. He has been impactful, no doubt about it. We've seen him bull rush his way, we've seen him show quickness, all of those sorts of things. So he has been a nice addition to the defensive line. But I also think those rookies that you mentioned, the two defensive tackles, TJ Sanders, Deion Walker, have both caught my attention several times over the first 3 days. Walker, I think I mentioned it on the very first day of camp, bull rushed and pushed three Bills offensive linemen back into the quarterback to wreck the play. TJ Sanders has constantly been a presence of getting into the backfield and disrupting plays for whether that's the first or second team. They rotate them in and out there. So, I mean, these two guys who are going to be pressed into duty early on, Bills have said it. They've made no bones about it. They're going to count on these young guys, especially given that situation with Ogunjobi and Hoyt. But so far, so good, especially for Sanders and Walker, who have very much so been noticeable in this defensive front.
Deion Walker noticeable about his size, Andy, and the Bills kind of kept an eye on him and limited him during offseason workouts, said he was a full go as training camp got underway. Big man dealing with a back issue. Pads will be coming on soon, Andy, where this contact is going to pick up. And I still think that that's going to be something to watch for me, at least, to see when the hitting ramps up where he's at.
Yeah, there's a host of guys dealing with different issues. You're talking about Joey Bosa. You talk about Walker. You talk about different guys who've been banged up. AJ Epinesa is now banged up as well on that defensive line. And he missed Friday, day 3 with an ankle injury. Dorian Williams was out with a calf. So once the pads come on, it's interesting to see how these guys fare. But to your point about Deion Walker, they had him on a plan to limit his exposure during the spring workouts and OTAs and minicamp, but so far he's been full go, like you mentioned. Watched him work on one of the drills where they, push the pads forward on the dummies, and I mean, watching him extend, he is just a massive guy in terms of his size. Like, he stands next to guys that are 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", and 300 pounds, and he makes them look small, and he moves with a quickness. I believe that Ed Oliver said he's like a dancing bear, right? And if that guy is healthy and he's good, I mean, you're looking at a great player in the future if he can live up to what he was before the back injury kind of hampered him in his final season at Kentucky. But Brandon Beane said had he been the same player he was the year before, he would have been a first-round pick.
It will be interesting as camp goes along to see how things shape out. And, of course, the Bills will have a decision to make after those 6 games are up when those guys are suspended. I mean, it's tough, Andy, because the Bills start with the Baltimore Ravens, and they're down 2 veteran defensive linemen going up against a Ravens offense that, with Henry, can be run heavy, and Lamar Jackson as well.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, it's Michael Hoyt and it's Larry Ogunjobi. Like, yes, they are parts of what the Bills wanted to do. They signed them for a reason, but it's not like you lost Chris Jones. You know what I'm saying? Like, these young guys, they're going to step in and play, and, the good thing is, like, you still have Ed Oliver and you still have Daquan Jones, so I think you're going to be okay in those spots. They've got plenty of depth for a reason now, and it's going to be tested early, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, the battle that I wanted to keep an eye on was Max Hairston and Tre'Davious White. Tre'Davious back with the Bills. We talked about this back on Monday. Seems like he's in a way better space than he was when he left the Bills. Has that dual role right now. He wants to be a starter. He wants to be the cornerback lining up opposite Christian Benford. Bills go out and get a cornerback with their first pick in the NFL draft. So now he's in a position, and from what you see early on and from what we've heard from both of them at this point, he seems fine with that role, but also seems like he's dead set on being the starter come opening day.
Yeah, I've been really keeping an eye on that position. I think most observers have been, whether that's fans or media members from the outside, kind of watching the rotation. And both guys have had their chances. Other guys, too. Dane Jackson has been in the mix. Jamarcus Ingram, Cam Lewis, a bunch of different guys have had opportunities at cornerback. But for the most part, it's watching whether it's Trey White on the first team or whether it's Maxwell Hairston and what the share of time is in that spot. And Trey White gets plenty of time there, and he has not looked like he's completely lost his full athleticism. I think he had a full off season for the first time in a long time, coming off an ACL injury and an Achilles, trying to get back healthy for last season, new teams he was with last year. So he's finally got his legs back under him, and he's out there to prove. Bobby Babich said Trey White is on a mission, and he's ready to prove himself. Yes, he's willing to take on the mentor role, but I think he knows that he can do that at the same time that he does what's best for the team. And if he ends up beating out Max Hairston, that's what he wants to do. Now, Hairston has also had some ups and downs, right? I've seen flashes of great athleticism, recovery speed, knocking plays down, knocking balls down, also getting beat from time to time. You're going to expect that with a rookie. Ultimately, as we've talked about, what's best for the Bills ultimately is for Max Hairston to win the job. But if he's not quite ready, Trey White has not looked out of place one bit when he's with the first unit.
And I love what Trey White said during his press conference today when talking about his role as far as being a mentor to Hairston, and that there are some things he just can't help the rookie with because of their different bodies, their different style of play. He openly said Hairston can react slower because he's way faster than he is. So there's nothing he can teach him about that. If that's where he is and that's where he's comfortable working out, and that's the difference between them. You have the veteran who has the knowledge, you have the rookie who has the speed to make up for rookie mistakes.
And that's incumbent upon Max Hairston to pick up as fast as he can the knowledge of the game, right? The stuff that Trey White's talking about, the things that he learned when he came into the league. And Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer were here, who were veterans coming to the Bills and could mentor him in that capacity. Other guys that were here, Josh Norman and different people in this Trey White era, now in the second stint with the Bills. And if Hairston can pick up the mental side of it and the feel and the nuances and kind of the understanding of pace and how receivers play him, and how quarterbacks want to attack him, and add that to his athleticism, the sky's the limit. But that's on him. And White alluded to that, as you said. He's got to figure that stuff out. There's only so much a guy can tell you. You got to feel it on the field.
And when it comes to Trey White, and then we can move on, Andy, you know, you hear this a lot with the Bills about being close, being a family, this and that. When talking about Trey White at any point during the beginning of training camp, everyone talks about him coming home. Like Deion Dawkins the other day referred to him like going away to live somewhere else for a year and then getting to come back home with his family. And you pretty much hear that across the board, that Trey White belonged back here in the Bills. You know, he talked about the excitement about just coming out of the tunnel on the first day of practice this week at St. John Fisher, to the reception he got from the crowd. Clearly a crowd favorite. I'm sure Bills fans want Max Hairston to step up, but it's good to just have Trey White back.
No doubt about it. Trey White is home. He's where he's made his home in the NFL. Came in as a young kid, 22, 23 years old, out of LSU. He's got a family now. They partly grew up in Buffalo, right? He's got kids. He's got all the things that he had here, and then to come back and kind of feel that love, understanding the organization, the fan base, all of those sorts of things. It's got him in maybe the best mental space I've seen since those first few years in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, at the end of Trey White's press conference, he said he asked to talk to the media early because we're done hearing from him for the rest of camp. So apparently he's going back to the way he was. You remember a few years ago, he would talk to anyone walking through the parking lot, just didn't want to be interviewed, which, you know, it is what it is at that point, Andy.
Well, we've gotten him, 3 or 4 times now since he returned to the Bills. So, maybe he's cashed in on that and he's going to just chill for a while. I still would love to hear from him after a game or on Wednesdays during the week. So we'll see how that goes.
Maybe he'll come around. Maybe he'll get to that point. Andy, the other big position battle early we've talked about a lot is the safety position. Cole Bishop, going up against DeMar Hamlin, and Bishop has been really the one out there first alongside Rapp.
Yeah, for the most part, you've seen that, although Hamlin has rotated in. Same deal as the Hairston White thing is that they rotate these guys in. Derek Forrest has had some chances too. Cam Lewis has been out there in a variety of roles because he plays a variety of roles as a nickel and a safety. We saw that during the season last year, right? He was pressed into action. He started at safety. But I have liked the way that Cole Bishop has played with Taylor Rapp. And I think that's really important. We heard about it so many times when Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer were at their best. Those two just knew what the other was going to do. They knew with a look or just even a sense of where a guy was headed. They knew where they needed to go because they played together so well and understood each other. And if Cole Bishop gets that understanding of the game, the understanding of how he'll play in tandem with Rapp and with Taron Johnson and the defensive backs and how he fits in the scheme with the linebackers and the soft spots in the zones, where he needs to be, where he can cheat. That's going to be really important for him to, again, use his traits, the athleticism, the size that he brings to the table to make an impact. And I've liked the way that he's played during training camp so far. Hamlin hasn't looked bad by any stretch of the imagination. But I think Cole Bishop, to me right now at least, would seem to be in front.
While I was speeding from Rochester to Buffalo to get in studio, Andy, Rapp was on with the guys at One Bills Live, talking about the fact that him and Bishop actually stayed here during the break and were continuing to build their bond and work out at the Bills facility, which is when you hear something like that. He even talked about Hyde and Poyer on how they put in the time to become as close as they ended up becoming, and that's what he's looking to get out of him and Bishop as far as their relationship would go on the field.
I'm super impressed with Taylor Rapp and the leader he's become. And they said that last season, that he was growing into a leadership role. And people kind of were like, it's Taylor Rapp. How good is this guy? I mean, you saw it, 3 interceptions on the day today, and the way that he's, taking Cole Bishop under his wing and working with DeMar Hamlin and doing all those things. I mean, I've been incredibly impressed with what he's able to do as a quarterback of the defense on the back end. And that's really, really important. Yeah, he comes in and he's got that reputation as a hard hitter that's willing to throw his body around, but the cerebral part and the leadership, I've been really happy to see the way he's progressed in that, and I think Bills fans are going to like that too.
Absolutely. I remember last year they kept bringing Rapp to the podium, and people were like, it's not the same as Poyer or Hyde being there. But the whole thing kind of grew on you as the season went on, and the way he communicated with the media and stuff, like he was getting into a more comfortable spot. And I think that where he is now with the Bills and what he needs to do with Cole Bishop, I think he's in a really good spot to be in that role he's in.
Yeah, I mean, he is one of the key pieces of this defense. I mean, he signed a 3-year deal, and I think that the Bills really liked what they had in him, and they're watching it grow. We've seen so many times that Sean McDermott and his crew and his system, for whatever reason, and there's exceptions, but tend to get the best out of defensive backs, whether they're unheralded guys, whether they're undrafted, whether they were free agents. I mean, everyone's going to point to Kyer Elam as a failure in that regard. But for the other, look at Benford. Look at all these different people. Look at what they did with Poyer and Hyde. Poyer was kind of, just bouncing around, and Hyde had done okay and been fine with the Packers, but elevated himself to a whole nother level when he got to Buffalo. And I think you're kind of seeing that come to fruition now with Taylor Rapp.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who are curious, because I'm kind of curious on how Matt Milano is going to go in the season. So far, Matt Milano looks like he's back to Matt Milano.
Yeah, he's flying around, man. He's making plays. He's tracking down guys. I think he nearly tracked down Elijah Moore, who's incredibly fast on an end around the other day. You're seeing him do the things that he needs to do. And, for a couple of years now, we've said, what would it look like for a full season with Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano? Milano now getting up there in age, but still looking like he's the player close to. I mean, I don't know if we'll see him ever at that all pro level.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we will, that he was a few seasons ago. But, I mean, he's all over the field and looking every part the guy that they need him to be.
Now, we don't know when. Nothing's official. I'm assuming it'll be early next week. They'll start padding up and we'll get more competition out of some of these guys. And that's when I think my eyes will turn more to the wide receiver versus defensive back battles than they are. I mean, obviously, the defensive backs can start to get more physical. Keon Coleman with an up and down first 3 days. It'll be interesting to see when he can actually use his body because he's looked a lot bigger since he returned from off season, and what you're going to get out of Joshua Palmer and Elijah Moore and what happens there, because the last couple of days I was over there watching the wide receivers and whatnot, and it's hard to judge what you're actually going to get until we get a little bit of contact, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting with Coleman because he's bigger and he's supposed to be more physical and all those sorts of things. There are times that I notice, and this isn't a knock, it's just maybe something he's working on or needs to get better at, that sometimes in those physical battles, he doesn't quite get off the ground in time, right, to get up and get the football. Other times we've seen him rise up and do that. So that's something that guy is just going to be a story, right? Like he's just going to be almost always some sort of work in progress, I think. And you're going to see strides moving forward. And then there's going to be times where you're like, oh man, what's going on here? And I think, through 3 days of camp, we've seen that, no doubt about it. He's made some nice plays. There were times he's gotten open. You've seen him run nice routes. And when he's, has some time to get open, I think that's a big key for him because he's not a burner. So he's got to be able to somehow win in other ways. And sometimes that's the way the offense, we talked about scheming him open or him being able to work on the technique and the footwork and the deception to get open as well. You brought up Palmer. I think he's going to be really good.
So do I. I mean,
yeah, it's
his role in LA, a lot different than what it's going to be here with Josh Allen.
Yeah, a bunch of us were talking about that, media members on the sidelines, and it's like, okay, so last season when Palmer had the chance to be the guy in LA with the Chargers, didn't really impress, and it was Ladd McConkey, the rookie, who kind of took over and went by storm. So you're like, all right, so how good can this guy be in year 5? Same thing with Elijah Moore, but like to me, the attributes they show at least in practice are really impressive, and a knack of getting open. Great smooth route running by Palmer. Ability to get open deep. We saw Josh Allen hit him in stride on a deep pass at one point. The ability to get open on the sidelines. And then Moore, a guy who is just so sudden, so quick, almost violent in the way that he stops and then starts and then moves with quickness again. And both of those guys have been really impressive, and I've been impressed by Samuel too. So it seems, at least on paper and through the first few days of camp and the spring workouts too, that this wide receiver group can elevate, but we got to see it on the field. Remember Mac Hollins, and everybody gave him a chance, and then all of a sudden he's leading the team in touchdown catches. I would expect one of those guys needs to elevate towards being that number one besides Khalil Shakir and be moving towards being 1,000-yard type receivers. But I don't know if any of those guys are going to be like 80 catch, 1,000-yard type receivers just because the way the Bills play. And it's interesting. We were talking too that, okay, maybe you think you don't need the number one and the alpha dog, but sometimes you do in a big game, in a big spot. Think of the Chiefs game. Guys were really having trouble getting open. So maybe that's a role where Palmer can figure it out. Same thing with Moore. You get more out of Shakir, and you get more out of Coleman and Samuel. So those five guys, to me, that seems pretty much like the hierarchy. It's just how that all plays out.
I want to talk about Samuel for just a second because
Yeah.
he was banged up early in the season, but when you get to the postseason, he had that great touchdown against the Broncos. He did well against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship, and a healthy Samuel has looked really good early here in training camp.
Yeah, and these guys with Samuel, they're not exactly the same, but he and Moore and Shakir, and to a lesser extent Palmer, Keon is his own player. He's a different kind of player. All of those guys have skill sets that kind of overlap to some degree. And so it'll be interesting to see Joe Brady deploy those guys, because defenses again this season I don't think are going to be able to key on one guy, especially if they use motion and things like that, because a lot of those guys can do some of those same things. And Samuel, yeah, he's been really good so far during training camp, and they've used him quite a bit, and they've rotated him in, and Allen's found him. I think his ability was there previously. We saw it a little bit in Carolina. We saw it a little bit with Joe Brady. Is he, a star? No. But I think there's more to give than what we saw for the most of last season until that late stretch where he finally seemed to get healthy at the end of the season and into the playoffs.
I love the fact that you almost said Bobby Brady. I'm the one who usually makes mistakes like that. I love every minute of it, Andy. We move forward now. Bills get a day off. We're a week away from their practice at the stadium, the return of the blue and the red. But there's still work to do at Fisher. You get the day off. They'll be back on Sunday. I feel like Monday or Tuesday, the pads might come on at that point. Maybe Tuesday, just uppers, maybe the full thing. But yeah, now it's really going to heat up, and it's literally heating up every day in Rochester, as it always does. My gosh.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just pouring sweat out there,
Yeah.
and I mean that's not unusual for me. I'm a big guy, so that happens. But I mean, you're just walking through soup out there. It almost felt like when I was in Miami for that Thursday night game last season, and was just soaked. It's just so humid. When we come back from this little day off and on Sunday, it's going to be interesting to see some of these injured guys, right? Like I mentioned, Dorian Williams, he was wearing a boot on his calf, and you worry with calves, and he's wearing a boot. Is there any concern about an Achilles potentially, right, with him and issues there? We saw AJ Epinesa with his ankle taped up. When are we going to see Dawson Knox? I saw him working on the side field with trainers, jogging a little bit, doing some more of that stuff. So hopefully Dawson Knox can get back soon. Spencer Brown, haven't seen him at all, right? And that back injury that put him on the PUP list, that's concerning too. So, another day off, a couple of days of rest for some of these guys. When do those guys get back in the mix? That's going to be something to keep an eye on.
Right, and then the other thing is you hope that we don't show up on Sunday and now there's another player added to that. That's one of the things with training camp. When you come in the next day, sometimes you kind of get blindsided with something that was discovered after practice wrapped up today.
Yeah, and you tend to try not to push the panic button and react to every injury. Like, we're still 6 weeks away from a regular season game.
Right.
So, this isn't like the Wednesday before the Ravens opener and, oh, man, look at all these guys are hurt. I mean, a lot of it's precautionary. A lot of it is, all right, it's training camp, especially with veterans. Let's just give these guys the rest they need and get them right. So, any injury is concerning, but, I'm not going to, sound the alarm bells right now. It'll be interesting to see, especially with like Brown, because he has a history of back injuries, what develops there.
All right, let's do a quick 3 and out before we go. Christian Wilkins, Raiders, just got rid of him. He's out there. There's a report that Mike Vrabel is thinking about trying to make a go at Josh Allen's arch nemesis. Might be back in the AFC East, Andy.
That's an interesting situation because I think the Raiders were able to void some of his guaranteed money that was remaining because of the way that he potentially rehabbed from an injury, and then the NFLPA is filing a grievance, and there's going to be lawsuits and all those sorts of things. I mean, Wilkins was a really good player for Miami. It wasn't a great season last year with the Raiders, but, if he comes back to the AFC East and he's with the Patriots, and Diggs is there too, and that'll be fun. I think the Patriots are a team on the rise, anyways.
Yeah.
And if they're able to get Wilkins and he's healthy, I mean that's a big get for them.
Justin Fields back on the field with the Jets after all I heard about yesterday was something about his toe or something, and it might be a huge issue for the Jets, not that they don't have their fair share of issues.
Yeah, I mean, Fields is a player that, like, I like him in theory, but he just hasn't been able to fully put it together in either place he's been previously. I was a little surprised that the Steelers said goodbye to him because I thought he played pretty well for them, and I mean, Russell Wilson was fine for them last year, wasn't great, but I thought Fields as a young option, what might have been nice to hang on to.
Tough week for us children of the 80s. Malcolm Jamal Warner, Theo Huxtable from The Cosby Show dies. Ozzy Osbourne passes away. Hulk Hogan then passes away. That hit a lot of people probably out of the blue, weren't expecting that. I know you're a huge wrestling fan, Andy, so before we head out, my memory of Hulk Hogan is, first of all, he was in Rocky III as Thunderlips, and then him breaking the camel clutch from the Iron Sheik, and that to me is when wrestling just exploded.
Yeah, I mean, wrestling has always been popular in America. It's had its ebbs and flows, but that run of Hulk Hogan, starting with late 1983 into 84 when he beat the Iron Sheik to take the WWF title at the time there, and he held on to it for 4 years after that, and that was the run of the 80s, that Hulkamania era, the Rock and Wrestling connection. The first WrestleMania coincides with that, and then WrestleMania 3 with Andre the Giant and 93,000, 78,000 fans, whoever you believe, in the Silver Dome for that. I mean, wrestling was huge in the 80s, and then there was a little lull, and, people got tired of the red and yellow and the train, say your prayers, take your vitamins kind of stuff, and then Hulk Hogan reinvents himself as a bad guy, as a heel, in the NWO, in WCW, in the summer of 1996, and that kind of spearheads the next great explosive era of pro wrestling, and you get the NWO storyline, you get the Stone Cold Steve Austins and the Rocks and the Attitude Era. So, I mean, Hogan is, one of the, if not the greatest star, the most known star in the history of professional wrestling. You don't like the stories of things you hear about him, racism, things like that. Some bad stuff, coming out about him after all of that. But you can't deny, as a kid like you, growing up in the 80s and 90s, that guy was pop culture, and wrestling was a huge part of pop culture. I mean, if you told anybody who's Hulk Hogan, any person out there, most people have heard of or know Hulk Hogan. And there's not a whole lot of wrestlers that people who aren't wrestling fans know about.
Absolutely. For the record, Hulk Hogan turning heel with the fake black beard was me walking out the door on wrestling back in the 90s. I think that did it for me. I had friends who loved it. I was like, this is just too much at this point.
He had worn thin when he went from, there were some boos late in his first run with the WWF, now WWE. He goes to WCW. He's still doing the red and the yellow and the superhero stuff. And that was just getting old. It was, think about the mid 90s, the Jerry Springer stuff, the reality TV, edgy things, and gangster rap and grunge music. That didn't fit, right?
Yeah.
And so when he changed his persona, and sometimes people say it was forced and whatever, but I mean, for him to turn bad and kind of be bringing more of a realistic edge to pro wrestling at that time, he had to do it or he was cooked. And I mean, the NWO was a hot storyline. It changed professional wrestling for a long time. A lot of the things that happened off the heels of that, they're still replicating to this day.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. First chunk of Bill's training camp now in the books. Andy and I will be back with you next week as things roll on and we ramp up into the preseason and then the regular season. As always, everyone, thanks for joining us.